Annabel, so the Reserve Bank takes the interest rate down by 2% in just 1 month. Will this envisaged relief actually trickle down to all consumers?
Hi, yes. The interest rate cuts, in fact, even total 2.25 points for this whole year. And of course, the important message really coming from the Reserve Bank is that it's doing everything it can to try and help support the economy in this time of an unprecedented crisis globally. However, it's fairly limited in terms of what it actually can do. And of course, what it can do is put money in the system. It can cut interest rates. And of course, that means then reducing the cost of borrowing. So people who are in debt and who obviously have to service debt means they have more money left over at the end of the month than they would otherwise. And this is helpful in lessening the chance of bankruptcies, whether it's from firms who are borrowing, whether it's from households. And of course, in turn, then enables corporates and households to better be able to pay their expenses, which includes incomes for workers.
So I see there are 5 more interest rate cuts expected going into early next year. As aggressive as that is it really enough to save the economy?
So the problem is that it can't really help the economy that much from a supply side point of view. Shutting off the economy, shutting off the production of goods and services means you are not getting the production that comes out of it, the exports, of course, the supply chain in South Africa, manufactured goods, and that, of course, then limits the income ability of many workers. Even if we do obviously see the economy opened up in a phased approach, with some industries seeing resumption of activity, either on a full or partial basis, there still is a limitation in terms of, what that actually will translate through in terms of economic growth. And we expect a recession this year, probably between about 5 and 10% for South Africa. Such a severe recession, because the reality is the longer the shutdown persists, the more savings are eroded from corporates, from households, and of course the lower incomes will be, and of course that includes revenue as well, and that increases vulnerabilities. So that in turn, can make it increasingly worse from a shutdown point of view in terms of the impact. And really looking forward, yes, we do expect the Reserve Bank will cut interest rates more, and it should not be a bad thing for South Africa at all, because globally we're seeing massive quantitative easing.
Yeah, so the governor also telling us that this economy will shrink by 6%. You mentioned 6%. That's also a disaster for job creation, isn't it?
Sorry, if you could just repeat your last sentence, the line's bad.
Just in terms of the governor saying that the economy is going to shrink by 6%, it's going to be a disaster for job creation, and we're already struggling with that.
Absolutely, and of course, joblessness would be expected to rise. And the problem is it's a really, really difficult trade-off between, loss of jobs and the impact of rising unemployment on incomes and, households' ability to cope versus the devastating impact of COVID-19 that has seen many, many people, thousands and thousands of people die internationally. And the impact could be even worse in South Africa because of our relatively poor quality of healthcare from a public sector perspective versus many of the developed economies. And of course, even many of the developed economies failing to cope because they just don't have sufficient resources in terms of goods, respirators, and medical staff to face in the face of the COVID-19 crisis. So I think government's using this lockdown period to better prepare ourselves. We're looking to dramatically increase the number of respirators and other medical goods produced in South Africa. But at some point, we will have to open up again. It looks at some point that everyone will likely be at a huge risk of infection. And of course, many vulnerable, elderly and other people who are compromised at high risk of fatality. And this is a terrible situation that we find ourselves in.
All right, thank you so much for the insight. Appreciate it. Investec's Chief Economist, Annabel Bishop.